6th April 1994, Kigali. As President Juvenal Habyarimana's aircraft approached Kigali airport, armed men waited in the darkness nearby. A missile streaked into the night. The presidential plane was struck and crashed, killing everyone aboard. Within hours, extremist forces moved to seize control. Radio broadcasts began spreading hatred and calling for the extermination of the Tutsi population. The violence spread rapidly. UN peacekeepers guarding Prime Minister Agathe Uwilingiyimana were overwhelmed and killed. The Prime Minister, her husband, and members of her family were also murdered. What began with the destruction of an aircraft would soon become one of the darkest chapters in Rwanda's history. Rwanda, a people divided to be ruled. From the scramble for Africa, Germany made Rwanda part of German East Africa. They riled through a small Tutsi elite, giving them power and status over the rest. Following the defeat of Germany in the First World War, the Belgians seized the region from the Germans. The Belgians continued German policies and went even further. They strengthened Tutsi privilege through identity cards, education, and jobs. Tutsi and Hutu were not two different races. They were both Banyarwanda, the same language, the same culture, the same history. Politics turned neighbors into enemies. Colonial lies created hierarchies. Post-independence politics turned hierarchies into hatred. The scars remained. The consequences were deadly. Colonialism did not just take the land, it broke a people. Before the Belgians or the Germans arrived, Rwandans did not identify as strictly Hutu or Tutsi. People identified by clan, family, occupation, wealth, region, and social status. These were fluid identities that could change over time. In the 1930s, the Belgian colonial administration introduced identity cards that forced every Rwandan to be classified as either Hutu, Tutsi, or Twa. This turned social categories into racial, hereditary, and legal identities. The administration, with the help of local chiefs, determined who was Tutsi, Hutu, or Twa. This was based on physical appearance, wealth, cattle ownership, and traditional stereotype. Once recorded, it was passed down to your children forever. No one could legally change that identity. The impact: it divided a unified society into rigid ethnic boxes, gave political and economic privileges to the Tutsi elite, backed by colonial power, created resentment, competition, and deep social fractures, laid the foundation for future discrimination, exclusion, and violence. Identity became a label, labels became weapons. When the Belgians left in 1962, they left behind more than borders. They left divisions that would shape Rwanda's future generations. By the 1950s, ideas of freedom and equality were spreading across Africa. In Rwanda, two movements emerged with different dreams for the future. The Tutsi elite favored early independence. The Hutus demanded equality before independence. The Tutsi dominated administration and the best jobs under Belgian rule. Most Hutus had little access to education or opportunity. Hutu intellectuals began to organize, inspired by ideas of equality and the end of colonial rule. In 1957, Hutu leaders form Parmehutu, movement for the emancipation of the Hutu. In 1958, the movement grows rapidly, challenging Tutsi dominance and colonial authority. In early 1959, violent clashes break out between Hutu activists and Tutsi supporters across the country. Newspapers and radio spread messages that portrayed Tutsi as oppressors and enemies of the people. By October 1959, Hutu activists launched a violent uprising. Tutsi were attacked. Their homes were burned. Families were killed. The Rwandan Revolution was in full swing. More than 100,000 Tutsi were forced to flee Rwanda, seeking refuge in neighboring countries such as Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Congo, then Zaire. The consequences were lasting. Rwanda emerged deeply scarred. Tutsi power was dismantled. Hutu majority rule was established. Exile and fear became part of Rwanda's history. The hatred planted in 1959 would grow over decades, passed from one generation to the next. As the Rwandan Revolution evolved, one of the exiled refugees was a Tutsi from the monarchy, who would later play a significant role in the future of Rwanda. Paul Kagame was born on October 23, 1957 in Tambwe, Ruhango Prefecture, into a family of the Tutsi royal lineage, descendants of the ancient Rwandan monarchy. As violence spread, young Paul Kagame and his family fled Rwanda into Uganda. In Uganda, Kagame found something powerful: education. He was determined to learn, to grow, and to build a future different from the past he had lost. Paul earned a place at Ntare, one of the best schools in Uganda and East Africa. Ntare is also the alma mater of Yoweri Museveni, who would later become president of Uganda. Exile took him from his home. Education gave him a mission. The journey was just beginning. Choroch, Rwanda's First Republic, 1962 to 1973. For centuries, Rwanda was a kingdom ruled by the Tutsi monarchy. In January 1961, the Rwandan Revolution ended the monarchy. King Kigali V was overthrown, and thousands of Tutsi were killed. Many more fled into exile. And on 1st of July 1962, Rwanda and Burundi, which had been designated as Rwanda under German and Belgian rule, became two separate nations, Rwanda and Burundi. Rwanda had gained independence. The First Republic was born. Hutus took political power. Hundreds of thousands of Tutsis were exiled to Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Zaire. The identity cards from the colonial legacy kept the Hutu and Tutsi apart. Tutsi exile groups formed armed movements. They launched attacks from neighboring countries to return and reclaim their homeland. The Rwandan government responded with brutal force. Innocent civilians often paid the highest price. Rwanda was a nation caught in a vicious cycle. Rwanda's Second Republic, 1973 to 1994. On July 5, 1973, General Juvenal Habyarimana led a military coup, overthrowing President Gregoire Kayibanda. He subsequently became president of the Second Republic. Habyarimana's regime institutionalized Hutu dominance in politics, the military, education, and the economy. Tutsi remained second-class citizens with restricted access to education, government jobs, land, and business opportunities. Rwanda enjoyed relative economic growth and political stability. The Twati are, one of Rwanda's original inhabitants, were pushed to the margins. On 1st of October 1990, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, a Tutsi-led movement, invaded northern Rwanda from Uganda. They demanded the right of return of Tutsi refugees and an end to discrimination. The Rwandan Civil War had begun. The government was accused of ignoring the plights of Tutsi refugees in neighboring countries. Habyarimana's regime faced growing international criticism for human rights abuses and exclusion. The civil war drained resources. International pressure increased. Sanction, aid cuts, and diplomatic isolation followed. The economy suffered. the military was stretched, the Hutu-led government's power and legitimacy weakened. After years of war and pressure, the government and the RPF agreed to talks. On 4th of August 1993, the Arusha Accords were signed in Arusha, Tanzania. This signified ceasefire on both sides. The accords brought hope to millions of Rwandans, but distrust remained. Extremists on both sides opposed the peace. Then, alas, 6th of April 1994, Habyarimana's plane was shot from the sky, igniting the kegs that would explode to become the Rwandan Genocide. As Rwanda descended into genocide, the world watched and hesitated. Some international reporters avoided calling the violence a genocide. The United States was reluctant to intervene, wary of becoming entangled in another African conflict. The UN claimed to have no mandate. Meanwhile, the killing continued. Over roughly 100 days, an estimated 800,000 people, predominantly Tutsis, alongside politically moderate Hutus, were murdered. The world had the information, the world had the means to act. But for Rwandans, the response came far too late. After fleeing Rwanda with his family during the Hutu Revolution, the young Paul Kagame would return to Rwanda on 2 occasions. He kept a low profile, using the visits to observe the country he had been forced to leave and to better understand the political and social landscape that awaited him. But the road was still away. In neighboring Uganda, a young Yoweri Museveni was building a rebel movement to overthrow Idi Amin. Among those who joined Museveni's struggle was another Rwandan refugee, Fred Rwigyema. Fred fought alongside Museveni's forces during the 1979 war that toppled Amin. After Amin was overthrown, Rwandan refugees, including Kagame, aligned themselves with Museveni, who became a prominent figure in Uganda's new political order. For Kagame, this was the beginning of a military and political education. He later received military training in the USA. The boy who had fled Rwanda was now becoming a soldier who would later return to Rwanda. By 1980, Uganda was entering another period of political turmoil. A leadership dispute between President Obote and Yoweri Museveni helped push Museveni towards armed opposition. In February 1981, Museveni formed the Popular Resistance Army, PRA. Among its earliest members were 2 Rwandan refugees, Paul Kagame and Fred Rwigyema, alongside a small group of Ugandan fighters. Kagame took part in the PRA's first major operation, the Battle of Kabamba, in February 1981. For the Rwandan refugees, they fought to protect their community from persecution, while gaining the political and military experience they believed would one day allow them to return home. In June of '81, the PRA merged with another opposition movement, creating the National Resistance Army, NRA. Kagame specialized in intelligence gathering with the NRA. Although Obote was overthrown in 1985, the conflict continued. Then in January 1986, Kampala is captured. Among the roughly 14,000 fighters who formed the victorious NRA force were hundreds of Rwandan refugees. Museveni became president, and the men who had fought with him would be rewarded. Fred Rwigyema became a senior officer, while Kagame became head of military intelligence. For Kagame, the position would provide experience, connections, and deeper understanding of the military and political forces surrounding Rwanda. Paul Kagame and Fred Rwigyema maintained close ties with fellow Rwandan refugees within the Ugandan army. Over time, the relationships helped create a network of Rwandan officers and soldiers who shared a common ambition. But their growing influence soon drew the wrong attention. By 1988, President Juvenal Habyarimana and some Ugandan officials were increasingly uncomfortable with the prominent positions held by Rwandan refugees in Museveni's army. This led to Paul's and Fred's demotion. And although they both still had considerable influence, the demotion marked a turning point. Their future would no longer be tied to the Ugandan military. They turned their sights towards Rwanda. Around the same period, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, emerged as the political and military organization representing the aspirations of many Rwandan refugees. Fred Rwigyema became its leader. The road to Rwanda was becoming clearer. On October 1990, the RPF launched its long-awaited return to Rwanda. Led by Fred Rwigyema, around 4,000 fighters crossed into Rwanda through the Kagitumba border post, north of the country. This occurred while Kagame was thousands of miles in Kansas, attending the United States Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. Then tragedy struck. Fred was killed, shot in the head, on the second day of the campaign. His death plunged the RPF into uncertainty. Consequently, the RPF was pushed back towards the far northeast of Rwanda by the Rwandan army, with the backing of France and Zaire, which would later become Congo. By the end of October, the RPF had been reduced to fewer than 2,000 fighters. Then, Kagame returned to Africa. He assumed leadership of the RPF and reorganized the movement from bases in the Virunga Mountains. In 1991, the struggle resumed. For the next 2 years, the conflict in Rwanda was at a stalemate. In 1992, Rwanda moved towards a multi-party political system. Finally, in 1993, Kagame agreed to a ceasefire, opening the door to negotiations with the Rwandan government in Arusha, Tanzania. After months of negotiations, the Arusha Accords were signed in August 1993. For the moment, the guns were silent, only to be shattered by the death of Habyarimana. In response to the genocide that followed, the RPF went on an all-out war, undermanned and outgunned. They were determined. And very importantly, they were led by a man whose experience had prepared him and led him to this particular moment. Kagame understood what victory would cost. He understood the tactics he would require. The journey to freedom had been long and costly for the RPF. From crossing into Rwanda in 1990, where they were pushed back and suffered the loss of a leader, to the stalemate they endured throughout 1991 and some of 92, to the Rwandan government forming a multi-party government to slow their momentum, and to the signing of the Arusha Accord, which only left more Tutsis to be caught unawares in the wake of the Rwandan genocide. It had been a long battle. In late 1994, the RPF launched a final decisive offensive on all fronts. The government forces had been outmaneuvered and outplayed by the Kagame-led RPF. The RPF had been outnumbered but never outthought. They had superior strategy and unwavering discipline. Kagame understood psychological warfare and the people's support. They had a clear vision and a relentless will. Between 3rd and 4th of July 1994, Kigali fell to the RPF. The genocide regime collapsed, and a new chapter began. Winning the war was only the beginning. Habyarimana's MRND party was outlawed. Positions previously held by MRND were assigned to members of the RPF and its allies. The RPF's military wing was reorganized and renamed the Rwandan Patriotic Army, RPA. The new government was deliberately presented as broader than RPF alone. Pasteur Bizimungu, a Hutu civil servant under Habyarimana, who later joined the RPF, was appointed president of Rwanda, while Paul Kagame became the vice president and minister of defense. Kagame, however, retained enormous influence over the RPA and RPF. Bizimungu and his cabinet focused on rebuilding a nation devastated by war and genocide. Behind the new government stood Kagame. After the 1994 victory, a unity government was formed constituting of Hutu representatives and Tutsi representatives. However, this government had tensions within it. On August 1995, Prime Minister Faustin Twagiramungu resigned. Paul Kagame fired 3 more ministers the following day, and although Bizimungu remained president, the unity government had collapsed. The new government reflected a new reality. The unity government was reduced to formality. Decisions were driven by Kagame and the RPF leadership. Pasteur was president, but Kagame was the de facto leader. After years as vice president, Kagame was sworn in as president of Rwanda in April 2000. In 2003, a new constitution was sought to prevent the repeat of past abuses and ensure no ethnic group could dominate political power. The collapse of the unity government consolidated Kagame's political power, but the lessons of Rwanda's past led to a new commitment: never again. Since 1994, Rwanda has chosen a different path, one of unity, vision, and relentless work under Paul Kagame. After the genocide, there was the Reconciliation Project, geared towards reconciling communities through the Gacaca courts. Rwandans faced the past and chose to move forward, together. A stable government was established with a clear vision of good governance. The Rwandan economy emerged to be among the fastest growing economy in the world, inviting global investment opportunities, including the highly popular opening of a Volkswagen plant. Rwanda emerged to boast of world-class infrastructures, with Kigali, the capital city, ranked amongst the cleanest cities in the world. Rwanda's greatest resource is its people, into which it continues to invest. From pain came strength. From unity came progress. From vision came a new Rwanda. If you enjoy these retellings of socio-political history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Every subscription helps us bring more remarkable stories back to life.
The world turned away and did almost nothing to stop the genocide.
In retrospect, it all looks very clear, but at the time, what was happening in Rwanda, the situation was unclear.
They cannot tell me that they didn't know. Everybody knew what was happening.
Tonight on Frontline, the full story of perhaps the darkest and most brutal tragedy of our time. It is a story told by the victims and by the killers, by those who turned away and by those who stayed and tried desperately to save as many people as they could.
By the time the genocide was over, I was so angry at America. America the beautiful, America the brave.
They are all still haunted by what happened.
I was the commander, and hundreds of thousands of people died. I can't find any solace in statements like I did my best.